Chapter 1: Shadow over Manchuria. The year was 1910, and the wind sweeping across Manchuria carried more than just the centipede and frosty carried whispers of death. In the bustling port city of Harbin, where Russian steam engines hissed and Chinese merchants haggled in the markets, an unseen enemy was stirring. The first reports came like distant thunder. A farmer in a remote village, coughing blood, a merchant in the city, collapsing in the street. By the time the authorities took notice, the plague had already begun its silent march. Wu Lien-teh, a young physician with sharp eyes and sharper instincts, had returned to China after years of training in Europe. He had seen the world's greatest hospitals, studied under the most brilliant minds, and now he was back in his homeland just in time for a crisis that would test everything he had learned. The reports reaching him were fragmented, but the pattern was unmistakable. A disease that spread like wildfire, killing within days. The colonial authorities dismissed it as mere cholera or typhoid, but Wu knew better. This was something far deadlier. The first case he examined himself, a laborer in the railway yards, confirmed his worst fears. Man's lungs were riddled with infection, his breath ragged, his skin already mottled with the telltale signs of pneumonic plague. Wu had read about such outbreaks in history books, but to see it now, in the heart of Manchuria, was like watching a nightmare unfold in broad daylight. The man died before sunset. By dawn, the city was on edge. The colonial administration, a patchwork of Russian and King officials, moved slowly, weighed down by bureaucracy and skepticism. They refused to believe a plague could spread so quickly, so lethally. Wu, frustrated but undeterred, began compiling his own reports, his hands moving swiftly across pages as he documented symptoms, traced contacts, and mapped the disease's path. The numbers were staggering. The death toll was climbing by the hour. Then came the turning point of meeting in the dimly lit offices of the King government. Wu stood before a room of doubters, his voice steady as he laid out his findings. The plague was airborne, he insisted. It could be carried on the breath of the infected, on the wind itself. The only way to stop it was with isolation, with masks, with quarantine. The officials exchanged glances. Some scoffed. Others hesitated. But Wu's conviction was unshakable. He had seen the future if they did nothing, and it was a future of mass graves and empty streets. As the days passed, the plague tightened its grip. The railway lines, the lifeblood of Manchuria, became conduits of contagion. Trains carried the sick from one town to the next, and with them the disease spread like a shadow. We worked tirelessly his days, a blur of clinics and conferences, his nights spent poring over maps and medical texts he designed. A simple but effective mask, a cotton gauze barrier that could slow the spread. He enforced quarantines, even when it meant defying the colonial powers. He was a lone voice in a storm of denial. And then, just as the crisis reached its peak, a glimmer of hope. The first quarantine measures began to take effect. The death toll slowed. The masks, though crude, worked. Wu's methods were proving themselves. But the fight was far from over. The plague had not been vanquishedly contained. And in the quiet moments between battles, we knew the real challenge lay ahead, convincing the world that this was not just a local disaster, but a global warning. As the winter winds howled through the streets of Harbin, Wu Lien-teh stood at the edge of history. The road ahead was long, the stakes higher than he had ever imagined. But he was ready, for in the shadow of Manchuria, a new kind of warrior had emerged, not with swords or guns, but with science, with courage, and with the unshakable belief that knowledge could save lives. And so the first chapter of the fight was written. But the story was far from over.